This is Puppets by Arlie. I'm Arlie, and this is how you memorize puppetry scripts. Now, when memorizing a script in puppetry, sometimes you don't memorize just one part. Sometimes you're memorizing multiple tracks in the same show, and then depending on what puppeteers are there that day, you will be put into different tracks. So you need to memorize different versions of the show. Sometimes you have multiple characters and voices in the same show. When I start out with my scripts, I highlight all my lines, and then if I have lines in another voice or another character, I'll highlight that in a different color. Now, the method I use for memorizing all my scripts, I learned in a book called Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer. This technique is used by competitive memorizers, which is a thing. Memorizing was a trade at one point in history. Before there was technology of printing press, people would memorize literature, and that would be their job, to go around and present literature from memorization. So this is an old technique that you can use for your scripts. How you start out is you have a memory palace. A memory palace is a familiar place to you that you can visualize walking through. It's used because evolutionarily, humans are better at understanding location and spatial awareness much better than arbitrary lists. This is probably because cavemen needed to go on a hunt and then find their way back to the cave. Throughout your memory house, what you'll do, you'll put each line onto a location in your memory palace, and it'll be a visual representation of the line at different places. And these are imaginary images that you're going to create. And interestingly, the brain loves to remember things that are raunchy, things that are sexy, things that have celebrities in them. So the title of Joshua Foer's book is Moonwalking with Einstein. He also put an example of, imagine Elvis Presley pooping on toast. When I decide what my memory palace is going to be, I usually use 1 or 2 or 3 memory palaces per script, depending on how long the script is. Next to each line, after I've highlighted, next to each line, I'll put a little note on what the image should be for this line. And let's see, I have right here, I have a penguin line saying, "What? I don't sleep in a bed. Wait a minute, a feather bed? Where did they get these feathers from?" And right next to my penguin line, I have a little note that says, "Brown eagle in pajamas." I don't remember what that image was, but there's an example. So let's do a practice of learning some lines, and here's a portion of a Shakespeare sonnet that we can practice on. Now, I don't know, the deal with memory palaces is it's going to be specific to you. Your house isn't going to look like my house, or your local grocery store isn't going to look like my local grocery store. So for right now, we're going to use a memory palace that's just going from top to bottom on our bodies. So the sonnet starts out with, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" And this is a little harder because it's Shakespeare and I don't really do Shakespeare, so the words are kind of very different, but the word shall kind of sounds like seashell. So, okay, let's all put an imaginary seashell on the top of our head. And shall, and then we'll drop down to our I. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" And I don't know, when I think of a summer's day, I think about having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at the beach. So we got, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" And then what comes next is, "Thou art more lovely or more temperate." So thou art, I'm going to imagine on one shoulder, I'm going to have a little tiny painting. "Thou art more lovely," and it's a little painting of a heart. "Thou art more lovely and more temperate," like a temperate climate, not too hot, not too cold. So I'm going to put like a little aquarium with a temperate climate in it. So I got, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely or more temperate." Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. So I'm thinking about wind, like maybe a cloud wrapped in sandpaper. Rough winds, and I'm going to drop it into an imaginary blender, and it's going to blend it up into a shake. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and I'm going to have tiny little shots of beer, because sometimes beer is called bud. Darling buds of May. And I'm going to put that on my heart. So, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. And so when I think of summer's lease, I think like a college kid moving out of an apartment at summertime because college is over. So I'm going to put that on my stomach. So we got head, shoulder, heart, stomach for our memory palace. So put this lease on your stomach here. And summer's lease hath all too short a date. So have one of those date fruits, but it's cut in half. Hath all too short a date, right underneath the lease. So that should be the whole poem that we've memorized now. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. And that's how I memorize my puppet scripts. Thank you so much for watching.